So Donald Trump has handed over millions of tax files, millions of pages of tax files after the Supreme Court forced him to, and they are now in the hands of the Manhattan District Attorney, basically the prosecutor, Cy Vance. And this is a big deal. If you do want to see Trump face any kind of accountability, whether that means going to jail or big fines or just being rung up, in a courtroom in front of a judge and jury and all these sorts of things, this is the first step, because this is crucial evidence. As I talked about earlier in the week, these are the sorts of documents that won't just point out direct things like tax fraud, but if you're trying to find any other sort of bribe or blackmail or some sort of misdealing in the business world or in the personal world, the tax files can often tell you things. A lot of people have famously pointed out that how the cops got Al Capone, how they got the famous mafia guy Al Capone, was based on his tax returns. They could look at his tax returns and find criminal activity within those more than they could, with other investigations. Because tax documents either don't lie, or if they do lie, the lies can be spotted by skillful enough investigators. And again, there are millions of pages here, so it could take weeks, if not longer, maybe months, to go through them all to get a real sense for what's there and what isn't there. But this is a big deal. And there's a couple other factors here that I think are really important. One, I think a lot of these prosecutors are sort of racing against one another. And I do think that's going to influence Trump's post-political, trial phase, his post-political criminal justice phase, because there's now two separate cases against him in two different states by two district attorneys for very different reasons. You have this case, of course, which has been brewing for a long time, for years now in New York, trying to get his tax returns to see if there's been any financial and political and legal malfeasance by Trump and his business. But also, you have that case in Georgia based on the fact that Donald Trump called, Brad Raffensperger and other Georgian officials, basically saying to them, find me votes. Basically, Donald Trump trying to interfere with the 2020 election in that state, saying, give me 12,000 votes or I'm going to be really mad at you and I'm going to make your life hell, basically threatening an official. And so these are two cases being brought by two different district attorneys, and they're gathering their evidence right now. Maybe there's a certain incentive to be first. So you might see a bit quicker activity because you want to be the first one to really ring Trump up on charges, but the cases are very different. Another factor here are the Trump kids. The Trump kids are definitely in trouble with this. I don't know if they're going to go to jail. I don't know if they're going to get stiff fines. I don't know the true extent, but the reality of Donald Trump intertwining his kids so deeply with his business and his politics, both his White House and his campaign, means they are inseparable here. Basically, Don Jr., Eric, Ivanka, Jared Kushner, his son-in-law, maybe Tiffany as well, although she's a little bit more separate. They are all at risk here because the documents, again, include Trump tax files, but that means they include related businesses within the Trump organization that have been run or at least overseen by Ivanka and Eric and Don Jr. But it's also about any sort of tangential documents that aren't strictly related to taxes, because not every document in the millions are literal tax files. Some of them are adjacent documents, which include his kids. And so there was a report where a tax expert basically said the Trump kids should be worried about legal and financial penalties, and he explains the extent of the documents. It says here, there's almost a terabyte of data, he said, of the Trump financial records. That's massive. That's thousands upon thousands of documents, and it's going to show how they prepared the tax returns over the last 8 years that they're looking at. The memos back and forth, records of phone calls where the accountants were being instructed. So if there's any malfeasance, nonfeasance, or misfeasance in there, it's very likely to be in that terabyte. So that's a mighty pile of information they have to go through, and that includes his kids' direct involvement. So Donald Trump, one of the reasons he wanted to create this presidency, run his presidency, whether to win or even lose, was to create this Trump empire, to perpetuate it, and to sort of install his kids as like the princes and princesses of this new Trump kingdom. But it turns out that because he involved them in his crimes, they may all go down with him like a giant house of cards.